We're going to start out with a flag salute. Richard, would you like to lead us in that?
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, I guess our next item is roll call. Kathy?
Mr. Gray?
Here.
Mr. Nader?
Here.
Mr. Moss?
Here.
Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. Rakucci? Mr. Denayo?
Here.
Mr. Sevison?
Here. Well, we have 6 out of 7. That's not too bad. We have a report now from the planning director. EJ, good to see you.
Good morning. How's everybody doing this morning?
Good. Great.
EJ Avaldi with the Planning Services Division. So for today's commission, we have 2 new developments. You have a 1020 item, Rio Bravo Wood Waste Chip and Grind. They are requesting a continuance. And at 1035 Expo Floors, the applicant, who is also the appellant, is asking to withdraw their appeal. Staff will provide more information on that when we get to those timed items. Upcoming Planning Commission hearings, we talked about having 2 meetings in June. June 12th, we're going to have you consider the Sheridan Community Plan update. And then on June 26th, we're still planning to go to Tahoe. That will be at the North Tahoe Event Center in Kings Beach. So far on that agenda, we have the North Star Mountain Master Plan. A couple extensions of time may be on there for chairlifts, one at Squaw Valley, one at Alpine Meadows. We have the Denny's Trailer Park. There's a map modification, the Faulkner Garage, and then we'll also give a status on the Tahoe Community Plan update that's going on. July 10th, moving out to that month, the Community Center ZTA, which you just had a workshop on, that will be coming back for a recommendation by your commission that's going to go to the board. As far as the Board of Supervisor meetings, this past Tuesday, there were no land development issues or items on the agenda. However, the board did authorize the closure of our agency front counter. That's here in Auburn, up in Tahoe as well, and that's to upgrade our permit tracking system. We've had this Plus system in place, which I don't know, I guess it's been about 10 years now, and we are now replacing that with an Excella system, which is going to kind of help streamline the whole permitting and tracking of all land use permits, building permits, et cetera. So we're shutting down for a day just so we can get that system, everything migrated over and set up to go. See, June 3rd board meeting, we have 2 of the master plans for Placer Vineyards going forward. The sewer master plan, transit master plans, those are requirements that are necessary to move forward with the...
Yeah.
June 3rd,
Question?
I'm sorry, EJ.
Board of Supervisors.
June 3rd.
Oh, that was Board of Supervisors.
Board of Supervisors, yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I need to clarify. Yeah, so that's going to the Board of Supervisors. Those don't go to the Planning Commission. They were just required to go to the board for approval. And that's so they can get implemented with the other projects that are going on, such as the first development phase of vineyards, which we are actually working with some ownership groups out there right now. The other thing going on at June 3rd at the board, they'll be given a comprehensive county budget update at that meeting. And then at the June 17th Board of Supervisors meeting, they will be considering the appeal of the Friends of the North Fork, and that's of the Planning Commission's approval of the Camel's Hump Caretakers Residence.
Did you say June 12th was Planning Commission?
Okay, so let's go, just so I can clarify Planning Commission dates. 2 meetings in June. June 12th is going to be here.
Here.
And that's where we're going to have you consider the Sheridan Community Plan update. And then June 26th is going to be the Tahoe meeting.
There, okay.
And I believe one of you was going to be, I think Mr. Denayo was going to be absent that meeting. In June.
Yeah, I'll be absent on the 12th meeting.
So will
I'll be here on the 26th.
Okay. And we'll coordinate transportation up to Tahoe at the next Planning Commission meeting.
Okay.
So that's it as far as meetings. I do want to talk about or announce a couple of staff changes that we've had here in planning. Crystal Jacobson has recently been promoted to principal planner. That's going to be providing me with some additional help. That is going to be good. She's still going to be administering the Tahoe Community Plan update as well. And then Edmund Sullivan has accepted a position with Santa Clara County as a new director of their Habitat Conservation Planning Agency. Edmund, he's been with the county for about 11 years and has filled a special role in natural resources, working on everything from the PCCP to creek restoration projects and fish ladders, all kinds of good things. He's been a valuable resource to a number of the county departments, special interest groups out there, outside agencies. He's been all around. So this is a great opportunity for Edmund. We'll certainly miss him. But I want to congratulate both Crystal and Edmund. So what that means, we're gonna have to fill some positions. We got recruitments going on right now. Hopefully, in the next coming meetings, you'll see some new faces around here. So that's what I have to report.
EJ, I have a question on a project or a proposed project. At Willow Creek and 49, they have a sign up saying a shopping center sort of coming. Is there something moving on that one?
Still in the entitlement process. Yeah, no approval. I believe that does come before your commission, but I don't believe we're at that stage yet.
Doing a little early marketing.
Yes, I'd say.
Any other questions?
Thank you, EJ.
All right, we'll carry on.
Well, I don't think I've congratulated you on your advancement either.
We did.
I did?
Yeah.
Okay, well. Okay, we've had a report from the planning director. Now it's an opportunity for the public to comment to the planning commission if they choose to on items not on the agenda. Is there anyone that would care to come forward and address the commission? Seeing no one, then we'll move on to our first item, which is the conditional use permit and rafting permit for rafting. And Stacy, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair Sevenson and fellow planning commissioners. It's good to be down here in the warm Auburn weather. But this morning we have two rafting permits that are before you, and because they are virtually the same, I'm combining the presentation into one as opposed to doing essentially the same presentation twice. So as I mentioned today, the Tahoe Mountain Air Sports Rafting Company and the Tahoe, I'm going to call it the Truckee River Rafting Company for today's presentation, are both here today for conditional use permits and rafting permits. Their specific request is to renew their rafting licenses, which is considered under the Placer County Code as a special business license, and conditional use permits for their outdoor recreational concessions in order to continue their existing commercial river rafting operations, which are located along the Truckee River, for the next 3 years. That is the maximum limitation that the Placer County Code allows for these rafting licenses. So for every 3 years, we'll come back to you to renew that. The locations of which, and I'll go into in greater detail in a second, but they are located within the commercial and recreational general plan designations in the Tahoe Basin. And then their zonings are Plan Area Statement 001A, Tahoe City Community Plan, Special Areas 1, 2, and 3. They also have a residential zoning for one of their parcels, and then open space and water influence, and those are located essentially along the river. So I'm going to first discuss Mountaineer Sports, and they have a couple locations of which they enter the river, so the ingress of their operations. Maybe this doesn't work. Okay, to the bottom right of your screen is where they put the rafts into the river. They have off-site parking, which is on the north side of the river along Highway 89, of which the people who rent rafts from them can park there. And then at the end, where people get out of the river, it's a location which they've named Bell's Landing. And this is down at the River Ranch near the Alpine Meadows Road entrance up into Alpine Meadows. This slide, just to give you an idea of surrounding residential neighborhoods, the river, the topography. So again, the same points as the last slide. The ingress is up in Tahoe City, of which they put the rafts into the river. That's also where they do their recreation concessions, which means that's where people pay for their rafts, grab their rafts, get educated. There's quite a slew of information that they are required to provide each and every rafter before they get into the river, and I will go into that in greater detail. And then again, the end of which the rafters get out of the river is down at Alpine Meadows. So moving on to the next river company, which is the Truckee River Raft Company, they too also put into the river essentially the same location as the previous company, and they are basically right next to each other as far as parcels go. And then where they take out, they have a little bit more property, of which they have also off-site parking. So the rafting companies have parking, which they're required to do so, to provide for their rafters, and in which case they also provide shuttles. So a rafter that rafts down the river will be shuttled back up to their car, or shuttled back up to the ingress of the river, depending on where they end up parking. So essentially there's two parking locations up near the close to the ingress of the river, and then at the end of the egress of the river. So as I mentioned, the county does have a rafting ordinance, and this ordinance is very specific to what can and cannot be allowed for commercial rafting. A conditional use permit is required for any outdoor recreational concessions, and they are here today asking for renewal of those permits. It is a maximum of a 3-year permit. 100 rafts per company are only allowed at one time. So a total of 200 tags, so rafting tags, are allowed on the river at a single time, and that's 100 per each rafting company. The raft shall not be rented before 9 a.m., and their last raft that they can rent out is at 3:30 p.m. In addition to the logistics of the rafts and renting the rafts, they also have to provide for transportation, and that's the shuttles I explained, also parking. And I explained the locations of where these parking lots are located. And then in addition to the rafting education that I explained, there's also signage along the river, areas that are potentially significant in its habitat, or may have erosion control issues that we're trying to protect and or maintain. So they educate them on the signage. They educate them and ask them to keep their trash with them and litter maintenance. There are trash along the river, of which they can dump out their trash. The river companies also have to provide for bathrooms along the river. And there's approximately 12 porta potties that are located along the river. And these bathrooms are, again, maintained by the river companies, so that means the cleanliness and the emptying of them. And then they are required to provide for a river monitor. And this river monitor provides reports to the county. It's a fair share between the two companies. And this river monitor basically monitors what kind of activity is going on the river, the litter, rafting counts, and I'll go into that in a minute. With regards to the Truckee River water quality, since 2002, a fair share agreement has been made that basically is between the companies and the county that they will continue to provide river cleanup, habitat restoration, rafter education, and monitoring responsibilities. Also, the Truckee River Water Quality Monitoring Plan has been developed per Lahontan Regional Water Quality Control Board, who is also very much involved with these river commercial rafting businesses and just the overall monitoring of the Truckee River. In addition to the Truckee River Water Quality Monitoring Plan, we also have a stormwater management plan, also per Lahontan. And as similar, it's something we all work collectively together, and it's an annual report of the water quality of the Truckee River. And then we also have to consider the total maximum daily load for the same reach of the river of the slides previously. And that is the county's responsibility. So, we need to monitor that these river companies are adhering to the rules and regulations of the Placer County Code. And also that involves sampling and monitoring. So with that, the last year's 2013 River Monitor Report basically reported that of the two companies, they make up for less than half of the rafters on the river. The other half is private rafters who buy a smaller raft or bring their own raft and raft down the river. The average number of commercial rafts have been decreasing and have been decreasing since years past. I took the project to the North Tahoe Regional Advisory Council on May 8th. There was no public comment received, and the NITRAC members voted to approve the 3-year renewal of their permit. We did conduct a CEQA analysis and determine a mitigated negative declaration for the project. It concluded that there could result in potential significant impacts as it relates to the items on the screen, including water quality, biological resources, habitat, and so forth. And we have implied conditions of approval that will help mitigate these to less than significant. So with that, I'm asking today that the Planning Commission make 2 actions, so one for each rafting company, but asking that for each company that you adopt the mitigated negative declaration prepared for the project, adopt the mitigated monitoring program, and adopt the CEQA findings and find that all the environmental impacts associated with the projects are adequately addressed in that mitigated negative declaration, and that the implementation of the applicable mitigation measures identified will reduce all potential impacts to less than significant levels. And then also that you approve the conditional use permits and rafting licenses for each company based on the findings contained in the staff report and subject to the conditions of approval. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I'm available should you have any questions.
I have a question for you.
Just a question, just first, now, are you going to, we have to vote separately on these 2 applications?
That is correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, Wayne?
On the, there was an email in here from one of the property owners commenting about the trash on the west side of the river. Are these companies responsible for that side of the river as well?
Yes, when they are in operation. See, this is a hard situation we're in because, for example, the rafting companies have informed me that they may only be in operation for 3 weeks this year just due to our low snowfall. So with that, and it's hard to regulate whose trash it is, but so during their rafting season, when they're in operation, yes, but when they're not in operation, it's the assistance of the Tahoe City PUD, and we just hope the individual rafter themselves, but we're trying to educate.
The local agency does the cleanup work when they're not in operation? Is that
they try. I've been working with the Tahoe City Public Utility District to get a better handle of what they do. Right. I know that they assist with the porta potties because those porta potties are also used for the bikers and the walkers along the bike path, right. Which is just off of the river. So, so there's a lot of different folks who use the river and or use the bike path and all the porta potties of which the companies are required to provide for.
I think for the county and for the local residents, it's a good thing these people are operating these 2 facilities because otherwise, given that there's over half of them are individuals who are just going down the river and they're probably accessing those trash cans, those porta potties. Otherwise, they would be just throwing their stuff all over the place and going behind a tree somewhere, I guess, for the other issue. So certainly a good thing that these people really carry the burden of that and the responsibility of taking care of it. The last question I had was on the water quality monitoring. It said that there was an $18,000 cost to doing that? Is that part of that shared agreement that's covered in that? Is that
Correct.
right?
Yes.
Any other questions of Stacy?
Yeah. Steve, have there been any violations or conditions broke during the past 3 years that you've had to address?
Not that the county has had to, where the county has had to take enforcement. We have had complaints about trash and litter.
Yeah, but I mean, no formal violations.
I do know we have one formal code enforcement complaint, and our code enforcement agent or officer is working with that party on addressing the trash issue.
Okay. The conditions of approval, have they changed from 3 years ago when we did this?
Not much. Basically, they just address, we updated to address, like the river monitoring report. There was a new, well, I can't say new, it's just the new number, and maybe I'll turn it over to Sharon Boswell with regards to the stormwater, the 18,000 that's going to be.
Oh, so we have that a mitigation measure in place that addresses not only the monitoring, but, so the fair share cost is what you're referring
Correct.
to. So the monitoring has only just started this year, so it is a new thing for there to be a cost. So the county, as I understand it, the Stormwater Division will be sending an invoice to the applicant for a fair share, and I believe their fair share comes out to about $1,500 per company.
It was nice of the state to do that for us. Pass that cost back down to us. Any other questions? I'm sorry. No, thank you. I had one. There was a time when we had to suspend alcohol on the 4th of July, and is that still being done?
Yes.
But just on
The week of July 4th.
just that July 4th period, okay.
That's correct.
I don't know why you guys get so excited. Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll turn to the applicants and see if they have any additional comments to the one Stacy gave us. Would either of the applicants choose to come forward and comment at this point? It looks like they're satisfied with the way things are. Is there anyone other than the applicants that would care to comment on these applications? Please come forward and give us your name and.
Good morning. I'm Jesse Bushy. I live at 1945 River Road, which is a footbridge to a small cabin surrounded by Forest Service property, about 1 mile upstream of Alpine Meadows. I'm not opposed to river rafting in any way. I've actually worked as a commercial guide in years past on other rivers. But I am a little concerned about the environmental impact, specifically trash, that is happening on the Truckee River between Tahoe City and Alpine Meadows. I'd like for there to be ways for us to figure out how this can be mitigated further and better. I think further steps need to be taken.
What would you suggest?
Well, one thing I would suggest is possibly maybe each raft could have some sort of mesh bag which people could put personal items as well as any trash that they come up with during their trip into. I don't think many people are actively trying to trash the river, but it is happening in a very large way. I mean, I still have cans from last year flowing past my bridge right now. That also brings up the fact that it's not just the commercial rafters on the Truckee River, it is the private rafters. And that's a tricky question as to how much fair share the river rafting companies need to put in. One thing I did read into on the river use count, and please clarify me if I'm wrong, is that basically one private raft was pretty much any floating device. So if I was floating down the river in an inner tube, with another inner tube behind me with a cooler, I'd be counted as 2 rafts. One thing to consider is, I'm assuming that one of your rafts is counted as 1, which can hold up to 6 people. So a 6-person, the impact of 6 people versus, say, 1 is typically greater. So that's something to consider. I hope that you will.
Okay.
I would like it to be considered maybe doing a few really large cleanups throughout the season on the river, not just the bike path area, and which I'd be happy to be part of, for sure. I personally have not really seen that done. Definitely seen you guys taking care of the bike path side, but not the river side, the west side, which is where I live, and others below me. Water quality, I'm not really sure what all the regulations on that are. You can tell a difference from the morning to the afternoon. The water goes from clear to silty, and I'm sure that affects the haunt and trout. That's all my comments, I guess.
Okay, thank you. You have a question over here?
Well, I have a comment. Since we've gotten, well, this is more general to the applicant. I would say that because we've gotten emails of concern and it's been brought up about the east side of the river and the trash issue, I thought maybe we ought to hear from the applicant as to his suggestion of maybe providing some sort of encouragement with their raft, you know, some sort of thing they could put the trash in, or at the end of the season, if you're only going to operate for 3 weeks, maybe at the end of the season do a cleanup down there. I can't expect you to clean up for all the other people that are not involved with your rafting, but maybe there's something that you can do to address that. Would
you want to come forward?
Yes, may I please?
Oh, sure.
My name is Aaron Rudnick with the Truckee River Raft Company. In addressing earlier questions about trash, as well as yours, and thank you for pointing out the amount of public and things as well. With that, we actually do the first and last day of each season is a couple boats going down with people in them. When we are doing river cleanup, our company sends a boat or 2 kayaks every morning before the first customer has gone out. And we get everything we can. We use the grabbers, we use the pickup sticks, we go along the banks, we actually go to the river proper and try to get every piece you can actually get to and see from there. As he mentioned before, one of the big problems is the public. We have to be off the water by 6 p.m. You'll still see boats floating down till 8, and that's why we not only do the garbage cans, everything on the sides of the river, as well as every morning we have to send people physically downriver to start the day just to take care of that extra. I mean, they can fill a whole garbage can just after 6 p.m. and, you know, we do the best we can. But when we're closed, I don't have the staff. We don't have people around. And it's been a constant trying to keep the balance with that.
This season, did I hear it was only going to be open for 3 weeks or something? Is that?
3 to 4 weeks. It's going to be we're going to close in July.
And so with that in mind, there's not going to be anybody monitoring it or picking up.
Public.
And it may be that one of us, I guess who, probably should talk to the Resort Association about sponsoring, even if we had to hire you guys to come down in August or whenever and do a midsummer cleanup. It seems like since it's only being done by the public at that point, that would be a fair shake. But I'll be happy to talk to them about it and suggest it and see if that can't be worked out somehow.
Yes, we do work on
several problems.
We do work on the pools as well. We have a snuba. It's sort of an air compressor on a big inflatable thing, and it allows us to go to the bottoms like Emerald, where it's very deep in that pool. And we actually do go down there with weight belts and mesh bags and pick up as much as we can. The snuba is, you know, every few weeks when you can, as it's far more time consuming. But every morning when we're doing river cleanup, we do go down. And with the bathrooms as well, the PUD, that's actually 100% these 2 raft companies, the cleanup in the bathrooms along there. Yeah. We actually don't get assistance with that, with the porta potties in the various spots along the way.
Question?
Yes, for the applicants as
Mickey?
well, or maybe staff. If you indeed only have a month-long service, Does that mean that the porta potties and the garbage cans are gone in a month, and there won't be anything, so it'll just be public only? Okay, thanks.
Well, I think the PUDs, don't they help with the bathroom, the porta potties on the bike trail? They don't put anything on there?
No.
I think they only put one at the public parking lot that they have to, that they're responsible for. Everything along the river is between the two
Okay.
companies.
They do have a couple of bare bosses along the way. They service.
Okay.
Bike path people fill that up.
Well, we can talk to the PUD too then, and maybe they can get a handout from the Resort Association then.
Well, it seems like they're doing as much as they reasonably can. They might have a little more attention to the other side of the river, like you're saying, but
Yeah.
picking up your garbage plus somebody else's garbage, it's, you know,
It's
tougher.
yeah, it's tough because I like going down and I use both companies and stuff. And my observation, just from the people using the raft rentals, are pretty much tourists and stuff, and they're not, they're not the ones, as the gentleman said, floating down on a tube with his beer cooler in the back, drinking and stuff. And
The one advantage of that raft is that in a commercial raft, you have a place to put the garbage. We actually provide bags to everyone as we're doing our safety stuff
Right.
and things, and
but
you're
I-
not losing them between your legs. in the
It's
middle.
just my observation with a lot of the general public coming down, you'll see some people separately where there's 3 or 4 of them on inner tubes or small rafts, and then they have their stuff with them, and they're the real heavy partiers. That it's just my observation in the times that I've gone down. So
Are you one of those heavy partiers too?
No.
Okay.
Maybe at one time in my life.
Stacy, you live with us every day. What things do you think we could do to help improve the situation, say on the west side of the river? And I think it would be worthwhile to try to have at least bathrooms and trash receptacles along the bike trail, because I think that's something that's really busy and gets a lot of people, and not just bikers, people walking and hiking and running use all that. And I would certainly, do you think it'd be worthwhile to try to strike a deal with Cindy and see if you wouldn't sponsor something like that with the help of the Resort Association or something?
Absolutely. I think your suggestions of both Tahoe City PUD and the Resort Association are
Okay.
excellent avenues that we can take at this point.
I think that's a fair thing. Okay, any other questions? Is there anyone else in the audience that would care to comment? Seeing no one, we'll close the public comment for both applications.
For purposes of the record, if the clerk could call in the first item, and then we can have the commission take the action on that item, just so we can keep it clear.
Okay.
That would be Tahoe Mountaineer Sports.
Is this
1A.
taken care of?
Tahoe Mountaineer Sports, yeah. What's that? Oh, there was a, did you have a question on that? That was
I just wondered if it's
Department of
been addressed.
Transportation. Did that issue get resolved? Caltrans?
Yeah, but parking.
For the permit, conditional permit.
Per their letter, they did say that they agreed with the mitigation measure. I think what they were trying to also state and remind us that they would need an encroachment permit, and the applicant is aware of that, and they are working with Caltrans. So they'll start with Caltrans with their traffic management plan, and then they will bring it to our transportation division for further approval.
So that'll get done. Okay, thank you. Okay, what's your pleasure on the Tahoe Mountaineer Sports permit?
Well, I make a motion that we adopt the mitigated negative declaration and adopt the mitigation monitoring program and approve the conditional use permit for outdoor recreational concessions and the rafting license for the Mountaineer Sports. And based upon the findings and subject to the attached recommendations and conditions of approval, which includes the CEQA findings, conditional use permit, rafting license, and conditions of approval.
Okay. Chairman, If I could just add one thing, there is one typo in condition number 23. In the
Forget it.
the last sentence, this is what Caltrans pointed out. It says the application is responsible for the full implementation of the plan. Instead of application, it should say applicant.
Right.
And so if you can include that as part of your
I'll
motion.
Add that, amend my motion to add applicant instead of application.
Yeah,
What condition was that? 23?
23, it was with Caltrans, they just had
Yeah, it was in Cal.
applicant versus application.
Caltrans
It was a typo.
23.
I must be on a different page here.
Yeah, let's
Maybe a different document.
clarify that.
Okay,
22.
that's.
22? Just a minute.
22.
Just got to make sure if it's 23 or 23.
Okay, that's condition 22.
That's correct.
Okay.
Now it's correct.
Okay.
Now it's great.
Okay, 22 instead of 23.
Yeah,
Did you get a second?
I'll still
no, we don't have a second yet, I don't think.
I think
Oh, we
Jeff-
did have one? Yeah, I'm sorry, thank you. So we have a motion and a second. With that, we're going to ask for roll call, please.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
Yes.
Mr. Moss?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes?
Mr. Denayo?
Yes?
Mr. Sevison?
Yes. Okay, that takes us then to
1B.
Shear Northwest Properties.
Or wait, we got to approve 1B. That was just for the one company.
No, I know,
This is the next company.
Yeah.
that's it, isn't it?
The next
Yeah, the next one is,
Shear Northwest Properties?
Yeah.
Yeah, Truckee River.
I guess it's all the conditions, does it have the same typo in it?
That's
Same
correct.
typo has to be corrected when you get to that.
Okay, I'll make my same motion with the correction to the typo on condition 22.
Okay,
I'll make the same second.
the same second, we have a motion and a second. If there's any other comment by any board members, roll call, please.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Johnson?
yes?
Mr. Denayo?
Yes.
Mr. Sevison?
Yes. Okay, thank you. I guess if there's anyone that would choose to appeal this, they have appeal rights and a filing fee of $536 at the planning department. Thank you all for your time and interest. Good luck. I hope we get some rain and fill the lake up.
Hopefully get longer than 4 weeks. I mean,
There's not much water
set
in
up
front
and
of my
take
house.
down probably longer than that.
So, question for the chair. So we're directing staff to approach 2 entities and report back to us at our next meeting on how that went?
Yeah, maybe we could ask Stacy to do that. Stacy, would you mind checking with the PUD and seeing if they could
And the resort.
amend that
And the resort.
Absolutely.
and get back, send us a note and let us know what you found out?
Sure.
Thank
And
you.
And Larry, with the Resort Association.
Well, the PUD would go to the Resort Association for funding.
Right.
This way it would
Because
work,
it,
yeah.
it seems to me the Resort Association has something in this, because most of those are probably tourists.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, they have an interest in it.
Yeah.
Listed as it were almost.
Okay, we'll get these out of the way.
And to cancel, so I guess not to make it official, but
Give more information.
Rio Bravo?
not real.
Okay, our next item is Rio Bravo Rockland Wood Waste Chip and Grind Conditional Use Permit. And I guess Alex?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. I'm Alex Fish with Planning Services Division. As you know, this item was continued at the last meeting of the Planning Commission so that staff and the applicant could work to correct a technical deficiency in the public notice, and that issue has been corrected. During the intervening period, however, it was determined that the project should be required to annex into Community Facilities District 2012-1 for the provision of fire service funding for Fire Station 77 in the Sunset Industrial Area. It was also determined that the project should be required to dedicate right-of-way for the Placer Parkway regional transportation corridor. County staff and the applicant are currently engaged in discussions regarding the structure and timing of those requirements. They are included in your report, but both parties are currently in agreement that more time is necessary to work through the details of each of those requirements. And so the staff and the applicant are coming to the commission this morning and jointly requesting that your commission grant a continuance of this item to an open date so that we can continue to work out the fine detail of the structure of those conditions. I do have Travis Finn. He is a representative of Rio Bravo in attendance, and certainly if the commission has questions of him, he's available, and I am as well. And that is the request this morning.
Okay, is there any questions of staff? Do you have a time
Well,
certain?
go ahead. I had a
continue to?
question. Go ahead.
Do you have a time certain you're recommending for?
We're requesting an open date at this point. We have a target commission hearing date, but at this time I think we need a little bit more information from Department of Public Works and to exchange some correspondences and work out some details. So we'll have to figure out the precise timing of when we're coming back after this meeting.
Okay, any other questions? Richard?
Yeah, I noticed there was an 11th hour comment from Recology.
Waste management.
Bringing up an issue that, air quality issue.
Odor.
Yeah, odor issue. And so I presume that would be addressed in this, so.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because both Thunder Valley and
Both Thunder Valley and the Waste Management Authority, correct.
Yeah.
Okay. If there's no other questions, maybe we'll go to the applicant. Have a comment he or she'd like to make?
No comments. Just appreciate your consideration for continuing the application or the hearing.
Okay.
Rather.
Thank you. Anyone else have any comments on this? Seeing none, what's your pleasure? It's been suggested we continue to an open date.
Yep.
Can you Rio Bravo to an open date to be
Okay.
specified later?
Is there-
Second.
We have a second by Richard. Roll call, please.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
Yeah.
Mr. Moss?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Denayo?
Yes.
Mr. Sevison?
Yes. Thank you, sorry. See you next time. Thanks, Alex. Okay, our next item is Expo Floors LLC, appeal of the zoning administrator's denial of a variance.
Just get through this.
Morning, Roy.
Morning. Okay. Yesterday, we heard from the attorney for Expo Floors LLC, and the applicant and the appellant is one and the same with this variance request. And this was sent to all the planning commissioners yesterday. I hope you got it via email. And the request is to withdraw the appeal. So the attorney, Christopher Wohl, is here to speak. And this is, I think, maybe it needs a vote and a motion from the Planning Commission, and there'd be a short wrap-up statement from planning if that takes place and it's withdrawn.
Question, if I could.
Yeah.
Roy, what happens with these improvements and that are in question? I mean, does this just get put on hold for a while, or are we buying time with this, or are they tearing them down, or?
They would have to.
Let me, I'm sorry, Roy, I apologize for breaking in. Let me clarify that. The zoning administrator denied the variances. There is an open code enforcement file on this matter. By the appellants and applicants' withdrawal of their appeal of the denial of the variance, this means that they will have to comply with the code enforcement instructions to comply with the setbacks. So no, this, to answer your question, this will not be put on hold. What the withdrawal indicates is that the applicant is going to comply with the setbacks in the zoning code and move the structures, and code enforcement will monitor that.
Is there a time frame for that at this point, or Just
Not to my knowledge. Usually, what code enforcement does is they work with the applicant to give a reasonable time frame in which to move that. So I wouldn't want to speak for code enforcement on this matter, but I do know they will be monitoring this and ensuring that the applicant, property owner, complies.
Thank you.
Okay.
The other thing I wanted to clarify for you is in terms of procedure, under our zoning code, 1760-110, Section D5, after an appeal has been filed, the only method of withdrawing it is to bring the request to the hearing board, to the Planning Commission, and having the Planning Commission take action to formally accept the withdrawal.
So that's what we're doing. We're being
That would
asked
be your
to do.
motion.
Okay, thank you, Roy. Do we want to hear from the applicant on this and get their concurrence?
I have a question for Roy.
Oh, I'm sorry. Richard first. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I noticed, I think it was on page 62, there was some discussion about the gate and some changes that needed to be made by, I guess, our public works people to make it so that the roads aren't blocked off when somebody's at the gate, and maybe some other factors. Are those going to be included in what's taken care of, or are we just talking about the variance items?
That's a good question. So actually, I guess we would need to make that request ourselves to code enforcement. So what the items that are encroaching into that right of way is that there's like just a sidewalk and gate associated with it, just that's adjacent to that moss lane. So we don't have the benefit of a survey. We're not sure how much of that encroaches, but it looks like maybe approximately 5 feet.
Well, it sounded like the gate needs to be set back so somebody could pull in and trigger the gate opening without blocking the road. That's what I was interpreting.
Yeah, so I was afraid that might have been what you were talking about. It's actually, there's a little pedestrian gate, I think. So we do have two issues. There are some fencing and gate that appears to be into the right-of-way, but we do have a standard that when somebody puts up a gate, that it's generally set back from the fence, like you say, so that when somebody's waiting to get in, they don't just stop. They're able to pull up and then maneuver the gate to open and then get through. So that's a little different standard, and that's generally something that fire is also interested in having occur. So I guess we would address that with the applicant and see what.
Okay. Well, it was brought up in this discussion, so I was wondering if
right. So they were
any
conditions of
intent to follow up
approval
on
that are no longer conditions. So we'll have to deal with it in a different fashion.
Well, it appears we have the applicant's representative here. Maybe we could get them to talk about it.
Good morning. I did notify.
Could you give us your name for the record?
Sure. Christopher Wool, one of the attorneys for Expo Floors, the owner of the property. Bob Lowry is also an attorney representing Expo Floors. I'm appearing on behalf of Mr. Lowry and the client this morning, just to confirm that we have withdrawn the appeal. Notified the clerk yesterday by email that we were doing that, advising that it is our intent to work cooperatively with code enforcement going forward to resolve all these issues in a cooperative manner. Okay. So that's the basis for the appeal.
And that includes any, now we're just talking about the variance issues, but it appears that there may be some other issues with regards to building permits, and like we just talked about the gate. And
yeah, we've my understanding, and I've been involved in some of the discussions with code enforcement, and quite frankly, this discussions have been cordial, and I don't anticipate any problems at all complying with all the code requirements on the property. So with regard to the other item you're talking about that's not part of the appeal, certainly we'll work with code enforcement to resolve that issue as well.
Okay.
Okay, well, that's good. Any other questions of the applicant? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, then what's your pleasure? Is there anyone else in the audience who care to comment on this item? Seeing no one, we'll bring it back then for some action. Okay, You're not gonna get paid, come on.
Make a motion that, we accept the withdrawal of the appeal to the zoning administrator's denial of variance to Expo Floors.
Okay, with the understanding that the applicant's willing to cooperate with staff to correct any deficiencies that were on site.
Right.
Okay, is there a second?
Second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
Yes.
Mr. Moss?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Denio?
Yes.
Mr. Sevison?
Yes. Okay, thank you all. Okay, now we come to the tough one. You guys are going to earn your money now. Oh, we're early. We're going to take a 5-minute recess and wait for the clock to catch up.
Some cartwheels.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
Now we're set. Okay, my watch says it's time, so Lisa, we're going to start with the Lundberg residence variance, category exempt, the setback variance. Lisa, thank you.
Good morning to you all. And here's an aerial view of where the house is.
Excuse me, it's me.
Oh, I was
My
wondering
thing
if I
fell
was
off.
too close there. So here's Tahoe, Truckee, and here's the area where the residence is. The application is for a variance to a side setback to allow an existing upper and lower deck to remain within 41/100ths of a foot from the property line. That's about 5 inches. And allow the existing corner of the residence to remain 4.93 feet from the southern property line, where a 5-foot setback is normally required. Subject property is located at 1346 Kingsway in the Kingswood West subdivision. Here's kind of a closer view in. Here's the subdivision. Here's their place. And here's their residence. Here you can see the outline of all of the other residences in the area. This large parcel here is a large recreational area parcel. It's about 111 acres. And here's a close-up of the Lundberg's residence here, as well as the undeveloped property to the south. The Lundbergs also own approximately, there was a minor boundary line adjustment that was done previously in 2008, which split this parcel in between this property and this property, so they own this portion. And that was finally approved by Tahoe Regional Planning Agency in about 2010. Here's how the house originally looked. As you can see, the topography is rather steep. Kingsway, this is the rear of the house, so Kingsway is up here. Topography slopes down. Original home and upper deck were constructed in 1977 and in 78 by a prior owner. At that time, the total side setback was 15 feet, same as it is today, with 5 feet on one side required. However, the zoning ordinance at that time allowed unenclosed porches, which was interpreted to be decks, include decks, to extend into that side setback 3 feet. And based upon the site plan submitted in 1977, the home and deck were both to be located within the property and outside of the side setbacks. The building plans were subsequently approved and the house was constructed. Here is a view of the southern portion of the home. This area here of the deck, this was enclosed and made a portion of the house. Here's another view from the street, that same area which was enclosed. And this is another view of the southern view of the home. So here's the area that was enclosed. Here's the original deck in the corner. Here are the site plans which were approved by the county in 2010. It's really hard to see because this is so small, but it does show the corner of the deck as existing. It was circled by the planner up in Tahoe as existing, and here it says 5-foot setback for the new added lower deck, which ended right here. Here's a copy of a portion of the approved site plans for the lower deck, showing the corner post and the deck back 5 feet. Since the 5-foot setback was noted on the previous plans, here and also here for anything new, and here for anything new, but this was existing for this corner. And because the plans that the Lundberg submitted showed that they would be going within with the that they would adhere to that 5-foot setback, staff is not able to support their request for the variance to keep the lower portion of the deck. Here's the southern face of the home during the remodel. As you can see, the remodel came out to the edges of the existing home. Here's another portion of it partially done. The Lundbergs were in the process of rebuilding when they notified by code enforcement that a citizen's complaint had been filed against their property. The complaint claimed that the deck and the corner of the house were encroaching on the property to the south, and they visited the parcel and subsequently issued the Lundbergs a courtesy notice, and they've been working with both parties since then to rectify the problem. This record of survey was recorded on March 5th for Vanita Varma, who owns the property south of and adjacent to the Lundbergs, and this showed that the deck under construction was built over the property line. You can see that here. A stop work notice was subsequently issued for the Lundbergs for the rear decks until the issue of the property line could be resolved. The Lundbergs attempted to resolve this encroachment issue by removing not only the small piece of triangle, but in order to keep the look of the deck, they also removed about a 24-foot section right along in here. Then the Lundbergs subsequently filed an application for a variance on January 31st to allow the remaining upper and lower decks in the corner of the house to remain within the 5-foot setback. Here's a picture partway through. So here's the top deck. Here's where they cut off a portion of the deck right here. You'll see that in the ensuing pictures. Here's the vertical post, the corner vertical post, and the girder that is integral to the structural stability of the whole unit. Here's where they cut off. This is prior to being cut off. They cut off right at these bolts here, and you'll see in the next picture that there's those 2 bolts, and that's where they cut the deck off 2 feet. This picture is a fairly current picture showing the outline, just to give you a visual of the 33.5 square feet that would be required to be cut off. This outer line here is the 33.5 square feet. This inner line is, where they would put a railing. Here's another view from the inside, so that's what we're looking at, this amount. And here's a view looking back at the house. Note the relationship to the existing doorway. One too many. So this triangular, approximately 33.5 square foot section of upper deck, as well as the very minute portion of the corner of the house, which is approximately 1/100th of a square foot, still remain within the 5-foot property setback. As previously mentioned, based upon the 1978 zoning ordinance that was applicable at that time that the original house was built, the deck could have encroached into the setback by 3 feet. So by the 78 standards, this little gray shaded area is the amount that would have required a variance at that time. This is a more recent picture of what the house looks like. At the time the staff report was written, we had received communication from not only Vanita Varma, but her attorney. The primary issues involved fire and safety, the Lundberg's access to the deck and being able to maintain it, and the opinion from Ms. Varma that that allowing this to remain would it would take away her privileges and her right to build where she wants to on her property. With regards to the first issue, fire and safety, I did talk with the North Tahoe Fire Protection District Fire Chief, and he said that as long as the brush is kept down and because the Varmas would need to construct to current standards, that there would be no issue with fire and safety, and any increased issue with fire and safety. With regards to the setback and that they need the space, Ms. Varma stated that she felt the Lundbergs needed the space on that side in order to be able to get to and maintain that portion of the deck. And in going out there and also talking to Mrs. Lundberg, it was apparent that that portion of the deck would be able to be accessed by either the lower area below the house or above, so there would be no reason for her to have to go on to the other person's property. Lastly, Ms. Varma claims if the Lundbergs are granted their variance, it will adversely affect her ability to build and will deprive her of privileges other folks have up there. And I talked with the Tahoe Building Services Division, and they said no, that wouldn't be the case at all, that they would be able to, the Varmas or whoever has the property to the south would be able to build right up to the 5-foot setback line, so it wouldn't affect at all where they build. Since this report was written, additional correspondence has been received from a couple of neighbors, and you've been given the copy of that. Based on the fact that the original house and top deck were constructed approximately 36 years ago, the remodeled house and top deck involved no further encroachment in the setback than what was previously existed. The upper deck was designated as existing on plans approved by the county not once but twice. And because the requested variance for the upper deck in the corner of the house to remain as minimal departure from the required setback, staff is in support of the requested variance to allow the corner of the house and the upper portion of the deck to remain. The Development Review Committee recommends that the Planning Commission, one, determine that it's categorically exempt from CEQA, deny the variance for the portion of the lower deck which was in the 5-foot setback, with the exception, I added this language in here to make it clear that it does not include the corner post or these girders, which are integral for the whole structure. It would be the removal of the deck up to that 5-foot point, and require the Lundbergs to remove that portion of the deck within 60 days, and approve the variance for the upper portion of the deck and the corner of the house, which are within the 5-foot setback, subject to the findings and conditions listed within the staff report. And I can answer any questions you might have.
I have one. Did this go to a MAC?
I'm sorry?
Did this go to a MAC?
No, this did not go to a MAC.
Any questions, Elisa?
Not me.
None right now, I guess. We'll probably have some later. Thank you. All right, well, let's turn to, I guess the applicant is the appellant in this case, which...
This is not an appeal. This is an application, so you want to hear from the applicant.
Yeah. So we go to the applicant, whoever owns the property, I guess, or their applicant.
Well, I'm not the owner. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Martin Wood with SCO Planning and Engineering. I'm a licensed land surveyor, and we were hired, our firm, by the Lundbergs to prepare the variance application. And I'm also here with Alan and Alvina Lundberg, the owners of the property, as well as their attorney, David Diepenbrock. So all I really wanted to say is thank you to staff for a very thorough staff report. Both Tahoe City staff and down here in Auburn were very helpful through this process, up to date. And we feel it's a very comprehensive, good staff report, identifies all the issues. The only thing I would just additionally stress, and it was in our original application justification, is there is kind of a unique circumstance. If you looked at one of the first slides that Lisa Carnahan identified, is it's hard for us to second guess exactly what the original builder and owner of the house, what their motivation was for orienting the house the way they did, closer to that one side lot line. But one can guess that slope and topography had something to do with it. There's an average slope of about 22% across that lot. And you can kind of see the way that the house is oriented. It probably minimized the amount of foundation that had to be built and excess grading that had to occur. So just from looking at it, and we do these a lot of civil site plans, back in the day when this was originally constructed, that was probably a motivation, is the topography. So other than that, we're here to answer any questions, and we're in full agreement of the staff's recommendations in the staff report, and hopefully we can answer some questions if you have some. Thank you.
Okay, a question?
Yeah. I have one question.
Yeah.
You said as a surveyor that you're the one that's basically filed for the variance and stuff, but during the process, were you in the process when the remodel first came?
No, we weren't. We were hired and asked once, I guess the violation was filed with the county, and the Lundbergs were, I think staff had recommended that one of your recourses might be a variance to rectify this situation. So we had talked about it, looked at the issues, and felt that we could help put together that application for you to consider today.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Not yet.
None
Thank
right
you.
now. Is there anyone else that would care to comment on this application? Any public? Or you're representing the, okay.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is David Diepenbrock. My firm, Diepenbrock Elkin, represents the Lundbergs. I'd like to commend staff for an outstanding staff report and presentation today, which has allowed me to shorten some of the things I was otherwise going to say. One thing I wanted to point out is that construction on this project started a while back. It started actually in September 2011. And this is something that just goes to the relative hardships, relative equities between the parties. My understanding is that the Varmas, who are the adjacent neighbors who opposed the variance request, purchased the lot well after construction had started and after some of the pictures you saw here where the deck was fully framed out, the house was fully framed out. In fact, the stonework was in place already by the time they purchased in September 2012. So I don't see any hardship to them for granting this variance. Whereas you've seen the hardship that would be imposed on the Lundbergs for making any additional deviations than they've already made. So I think what you have here is probably, it may go on record as one of the smallest deviations from the setback requirement. And I understand from, from staff, you've been provided with several examples of similar variances that have been granted to others, and so we're asking that the Lundbergs be treated in the same manner, allowed for a variance for what appears to have been an oversight when the property boundaries were originally staked, and that's where we ended up now. But certainly the Lundbergs had no knowledge that there was an encroachment to begin with, and so they believed that they were proceeding, and in fact did proceed in good faith based on the plans that they submitted and approved and were approved by staff. So again, we're in full agreement with the staff recommendation and agree to make the adjustment to the deck, the lower deck, but request that the staff report and recommendations be granted today.
Okay, thank you, David. Any questions of David? Seeing none, okay. Anyone else care to comment on this item? Please come forward and identify yourself.
Thank you. My name is Brian Hanley. I represent Vanita Varma, the owner of the adjacent property. And I have some handouts here. Some of these ended up in the staff report, but if I can give this to the clerk to
Yeah, just give it to Kathy here, and she can.
Some of these are pictures and other things that I, how many copies? 10? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And let me apologize in advance. I'm not going to be able to be quite as concise as the applicant, given the staff report As I'll get into later, my client disagrees with the conclusions there. And at the outset, I'd like to note this issue is of critical importance. Is of critical importance to Ms. Varma. She wants to build her dream house as close as possible to the property line. Really, it's with the staff recommendation, that will end up being 5 feet from the corner of the deck here. That's not only a safety issue, it's a privacy issue, it's an aesthetic issue, it's a snow shedding issue. You know, it's feasible the snow from their roof might shed onto the Lundberg deck. There's issues out there more than just trying to keep the deck in place. This has been a 2-year saga for my client. She bought the property in September of 2012. After she bought the property, she immediately took action and notified the Lundbergs of this issue, or the applicant. The applicant vehemently denied the issue, fought the issue. From November 2012 until, I believe, approximately May of 2013, they continued construction after being made aware of the encroachment. And this wasn't just an encroachment into the side setback. This was an encroachment physically onto my client's property. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind here. When you look through the exhibits here and see the site plan that I've provided at Exhibit 2, and which was also provided by staff, you'll note that the corner of the deck that's marked existing was noted to be right on the property line, when in fact that deck encroached by approximately 1 to 1.5 feet onto Ms. Varma's property. So this site plan that was presented to the county in 2010 was inaccurate. It was not an accurate site plan where the existing was marked there. Before I get too much further into the presentation,
can I ask you a question?
Sure, great. That's what I was.
Just to, so we can clear it up since you're talking about the purchase and the timing and that type of stuff. Was the person you represent, I guess, when did you discover where the actual property line was? Did she buy the property knowing where there was an error in the property?
Sure, I'll defer to my client, but I believe the previous owners of her property had a survey from 2003 that was actually provided to TRPA as part of the scoring process to decide if the lot was buildable. So I believe that disclosure came out during the process. But this is a long-standing issue. This is something that, in at least the TRPA files, and I believe Placer County obtained a copy of that survey. The encroachment had been denoted at an earlier time. So
she was aware of the encroachment when she purchased the property?
I believe so.
I didn't see the actual map because I was in here.
Mr. Chair, you need to have the individuals stand up and
Yeah, if you're going to comment, you need to come to the microphone, please, so we can get this recorded.
I saw the property and was leaving to India, so I didn't actually physically see the map until it was sent to me later. So.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for the question, Commissioner Johnson. I'd encourage other questions during my presentation. I'd like to have an interaction. If the commissioners have any questions, I'd love to entertain them. And since the applicant has sort of agreed with the staff's recommendation as to the lower deck, I'm going to focus on the upper deck. My client agrees with the recommendation as to the lower deck, and as to the house for that matter. I don't think my client's ever asked them to physically move the house that encroaches, fractions of an inch into the side setback. And I think if you look through, I was just provided with these 3 other variance cases from staff at the start of the hearing. But even looking through there, the only comparable property is in Tahoe Vista, and that involves a garage. It doesn't involve something as like a deck. A garage is a substantial expense to move. And I understand there's a support beam there, but I don't think we're talking, hundreds of thousands of dollars to comply with the setback here. They'd have to move that support beam over, but they wouldn't have to relocate a structure like a garage. So that distinguishes it from that case. And the other two cases were from Forest Hill and Applegate. The case law makes it clear that you have to be within the vicinity to have a comparison. And, you know, Kings Beach, Tahoe Vista area to Applegate or Forest Hill is not within the vicinity. And the case law makes that clear. There's a Stolman case that says basically even within the city of Los Angeles, if you're 19 miles away, that's way too far. It's basically, it doesn't count. So we would dispute that those are valid comparisons. You've probably heard this before. I don't want to lecture you, but I think it's important to remember why zoning exists when we're considering this and why there are strict legal requirements for a variance. And this was highlighted by California courts for ages. Each party, in a zoning scheme, each party forgoes the right to use its land as it wishes in return for the assurance that the use of the neighboring property will be similarly restricted. The rationale being that such mutual restriction can enhance total community welfare. And in a zoning scheme, reciprocity is key. Everybody has to abide by the zoning, or else it doesn't work. If you grant variances without special circumstances, then you might as well not have a zoning ordinance in the first place. I'd like to point the commission to my letter, which is at page 16 of your packet. I wrote that in March of 2014. It lays out in detail why we don't believe the legal standards for a variance are met. I'm not going to repeat those here at length, but I attached several attachments there. I noted in the staff presentation, staff noted 3 objections that my clients made. I think staff maybe inadvertently missed the biggest one, and that's in my letter, and that's that this variance application doesn't meet the legal standards set forth in the government code and Placer County code. That has to be the starting point for your analysis. And in particular, the most important point is codified at 16.60.100 of county code, and it states that you can only approve a variance if both there are special circumstances applicable to the property, including size, shape, topography, location, or surroundings, and this is critical, because of such special circumstances, the strict application of the chapter would deprive the property of privileges enjoyed by other property in the vicinity and under identical zoning classification. That's the critical issue here. Are there special circumstances? Is there something about this property that would prevent the building of a deck? Is it too steep? Is it too rocky? County council pointed me to a case I was unaware of yesterday that said regulations such as FEMA regulations on a beachfront property that require you to build an unusable first floor for safety and environmental reasons might justify granting a floor area variance. So there are sort of exceptions here, but none of those are met here. The only circumstances mentioned in the staff report are it's a longstanding use, and as we noted before, it was an illegal non-standing use. It was not approved to be in the variance, in the side setback, much less over the property line. And if you look at Exhibit 5, these were the original plans for the building back in the late 70s. And I think the county standards have sort of advanced a bit as to what needs to be in the plans. But if you look at the deck here at the bottom of the page, you can see that it's nowhere near the property line. It was never approved to be up to the property line. And if you sort of look at the scale here at the top, it has a 10-foot and an 8-foot scale. And when I sort of did the measurements with my ruler, I came out with, a 6-foot setback. That's what I measured there. That's what was originally approved by Placer County. So at no time did the original builder come into the county and say, I want to build in the setback. They never asked to go 3 feet into the setback as that 1978 ordinance might have allowed. This is not a circumstance where this was a legal use in the first place. There's other cases out there what I think is happening here is there's a concept in Placer County Code of non-conforming uses. If you build something and the county code changes to make that illegal, you can, under certain circumstances, rebuild that use. That's a completely separate concept from a variance. And what we're doing here is we're putting them together improperly, in my opinion, and saying if you've had a longstanding illegal use, that alone is a special circumstance allowing you to rebuild or seek a variance. And I just don't think the law supports that. I absolutely don't. If it was a nonconforming use, then they should apply under the nonconforming use statute. What you've got here is an encouragement to build illegally, have it go unnoticed for a long time, and then come back and ask for forgiveness. I don't think that's something the county should or ought to encourage. Are there any questions as I've flipped through?
Questions of Brian? None yet.
Okay. I'd like to note for the record, I'm not going to belabor the point, but at Exhibit 4, I submitted a copy of the old Placer County Ordinance. If you look through, that's being cited for the 3-foot setback. If you look through the actual language used, it talks about unenclosed porches or stairways, fire escapes, or landing places. I don't see decks mentioned anywhere. And I note under current county code, for similar minor intrusions, which this is a substantial, you saw, 20-foot above grade deck. This isn't a minor, this isn't a landing place, this isn't an unenclosed porch. Current Placer County code makes it explicitly clear. It carves out, it explicitly carves out above grade decks because those aren't minor intrusions. So we dispute whether that 3-foot setback even applies. And I'd like to note, too, that in the packet attached to my letter, there's a May 21st, 2013 from George Rosasco, and it basically agreed with me. He had earlier, a few days before that letter, sent me an email, and he said that 1978 ordinance applies, 3-foot setback. When he sent his May 21st letter, which is in the record here, he changed his position. He told the applicant that there was a 5-foot setback. He did not cite the 1978 ordinance. He didn't mention it at all. So that was a bit of an about-face there. And we wholly agree with his May 21st, 2013 letter. One of the other findings that you must make under the Placer County Code is that it doesn't injure any neighboring properties. As I touched on at the beginning, there's privacy issues, snow shedding issues. It violates her expectations that other properties are going to comply with the zoning. I've read the staff report, and there's comments from the fire marshal and from planning that, don't worry, you can build right there. There's absolutely no assurances that I see anywhere. There's no conditions. There's nothing that makes that binding. For all we know, 2 years from now, my client's going to come and seek to build on the property line, and we're going to get objections that it's too close to my deck. It blocks my sun. The snow's going to shed on my deck. All these things that are consequences of this deck touching the property line. So I'd urge the commission, if they were considering to grant the variance, to consider those factors and to develop conditions, if possible, to address those concerns, to give my client some comfort that what's being said in the staff report is actually legally enforceable. One thing that I spoke about with county council yesterday was possibly even something as simple as a disclosure document that would be recorded on the applicant's property that would make the applicant and future buyers aware that they were granted a variance for this deck and that the 5-foot setback might mean the property would be built 5 feet away. Some assurances to my client, more than just statements in the staff report, would be appreciated. The last finding you must make is whether this is a minimal departure from code. If you look at Exhibit 3 here, and you saw that in the staff report too, but if you look at the size of the decks here, there's massive decks on 2 levels that show that the decks can be built on this site. leaving the entire deck is simply unnecessary. It's not a minimal departure. If you flip through, the first 2 pages are sort of from the rear, and then the next 2 pages tee off on some of the photos that were in the staff report. And if you look at it from the sliding glass door, I can understand here, why it's important to be able to use the slider, and perhaps for aesthetic reasons why you might not want to cut the deck off in a triangle there. But there has to be some other minimal departure here that would allow the deck to jog over or be cut off a bit short. I've seen plenty of decks that go and jog and jog. It doesn't have to come out to a sharp angle, and the end of that triangle right there is what's closest to the property line. And I understand that footing's there, but that footing can be moved. And so we would urge the commission, if they were considering to grant the variance, to consider whether this truly is the minimal departure necessary. They've gotten absolutely every inch of that deck. And, it could be designed to make that slider functional, to make it look okay, to be feasible without giving them every square foot. I'd like to talk a bit about the equities just real quick. There's a principle in the law that you sort of rely on your own peril if you go out and build in the wrong spot. There are equitable doctrines that can come and help save you. None of those apply on variances. I don't see equities mentioned anywhere in Placer County Code. I think inherently as humans we want to do what's right. But I'd like to note that if you look at the site plan that was submitted in 2010, it showed the deck square right on the property line. Yet there hadn't been a survey done. I mean, what are the odds that this deck, without the help of a survey, was built directly on the property line? This is something that could have been fixed at the time if the applicant had taken the time or effort to get a survey. This is common in other fields. You measure twice, you cut once. You call before you dig. You survey before you build a substantial structure. There has to be some fault on the applicant here. And finally, I'd like to note just in passing that staff initially reached the exact conclusion advocated by my client here. If you turn to Exhibit 1, staff originally found no special circumstances. Somehow through the process that changed, but I think that at least shows that this is a closely disputed issue. This was something that was, I don't want to suggest that it was designed to reach a particular result, but I still don't believe there's special circumstances here. Cutting the deck back is the right thing to do. It's a large back deck, as we've shown. There's plenty of deck space for the applicant to use without encroaching into the side setback. And I'd encourage, if there's any questions during deliberation or with interaction with the applicant, I'd be happy to, or I'd like to chime in with Ms. Farma's rebuttal. This is a sort of a unique thing, and you got two sides here. And so we'd love to be able to answer any questions or respond to any points that are made. For all the reasons in the record and as set forth today, I urge you to deny the variance for failure to meet the legal standards required by Placer County Code. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Brian.
I have a question.
You have a question to Brian?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let me see. I picked up at one point there that you kind of had a possible negotiation point. And so I guess what I'm wondering is, what exactly are you asking for here?
Well, I guess I was trying to cover my bait. It's hard to argue against the staff. I guess staff has already determined their special circumstances. I've had a long discussion with county council yesterday. I don't believe the variance would be legally supportable on the special circumstances and the second prong of that requires you to compare it to other properties. I simply don't believe there's evidence in the record. I spent half a day yesterday looking through 500 documents that were sent in response to a public records request. I didn't see one document that mentioned another property. There's one statement in the staff report that says this, other places in the, quote, Tahoe area, it's not unheard of for variances to be granted under the similar circumstances. There's not one specific property. I was presented with the material today that has the one Tahoe Vista property, which I believe is distinguishable simply for the fact that it's a garage. It's not a comparable.
Yeah, I guess what I'm questioning is you mentioned there's a sliding glass door there that if they just followed the 5-foot probably wouldn't be functional anymore. And so you came up with, well, let me finish my question. And so you were mentioning some angled or something, which applied to me that you would negotiate, or you'd have a negotiation point there somewhere.
Yes, sure. And we haven't had those discussions with the applicant, and we'd certainly consider them. I think that the main problem probably is that footing, is that beam.
Well, it'd have to be torn out.
It would have to be
changed.
moved.
Yeah.
And when we were talking to our contractor, it didn't sound like that was it wasn't of the magnitude of moving a garage. There would be expense there. I would guesstimate it would be in the $10,000-ish range. But I think my client would certainly consider a proposal. It would have to move the footing, I believe, because that just happens, unfortunately, to be on the corner.
That would still allow some encroachment?
I think we don't believe there's special circumstances, but if we were presented with something today, we would consider it.
Okay.
But it would have to move the footing, and it would have to, jog out from the door in some fashion.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's what I was wondering.
Ricky, you had a question?
As far as the no negotiating point, you had already conceded that you wouldn't push for the house to be included in the removal, right? It is, in effect, past the line, the corner of the house, is that
I believe
correct?
it's a fraction of an inch or
right.
something.
So that would be negotiated away. We wouldn't have to push that, or you wouldn't have to.
I don't think we've ever advocated that be moved. That's in my letter. And
even though it is technically illegal? Even
though it's technically illegal, and that's the other thing when I look through there, and I'm sure the council's or the commission's aware, if nobody challenges something, it becomes sort of legal. If there's a CEQA issue and you do a mitigated neg deck and nobody challenges it, even though the document might not have been sufficient, if it doesn't get challenged, if you have amicable neighbors, if nobody raises their hand and objects, then it becomes approved. But that doesn't mean it would have stood up to scrutiny. And that's what when I look through that other document, I'm guessing that wasn't challenged.
Let me clarify for the record. Ms. Varma's attorney has stated on the record that they don't object to staff's recommendation regarding the variance for the house. Staff has included that variance to simply clear the record.
So if no lawsuit was brought or no complaint was made, but the county found out that there was indeed a violation, whether they were involved at all, we would be involved as a county saying you built across the line if somebody else didn't.
Well, I think we're talking apples and oranges. What I'm saying is Mr. Hanley is correct in terms of the law, but in terms of clearing the record on this house, the most prudent option which staff has taken is to add in a variance request for the house and to recommend that the Planning Commission grant that variance. That stays, the variance runs with the land, that stays with the properties so that it provides disclosure for future owners that although it does encroach in the setback, the variance has in essence made it legal. I've heard Mr. Hanley state that he's not opposed to that variance, but that's the reason the variance is included. It's simply to clear the record.
Could you address that he said that this is counter to county policy and that if we did approve the variance as staff has recommended, it sounds like could it expose the county to some legal action?
I might suggest, could we table your question and let the applicant and Ms. Varma's side, any public testimony be heard? And then let's go back to that question, because I think it goes more to the deliberation of the commission, if that's all right with you.
Okay, Wayne?
Rich,
I'm sorry.
Let me see, another thing I heard, just wanted to verify this is what I heard. You made reference to some kind of a recording of a document that, in the case, snow falls off the house, the Varner's house, and hits the deck and breaks it or whatever. You were mentioning some kind of recording that would recognize that that's their fault, not your fault.
Sure, and again, the point there is the commission is being asked by staff to make certain findings, one of which is that it's not harmful to my client's property. It's basing those findings on statements in the staff report saying, spoke to the fire marshal, we spoke to the planning, and she can build on the setback line. And what I'm saying is none of that's enforceable. None of that. My client can't take the staff report when the problem arises 2 years from now and wave it around, and if the fire marshal changes his mind or staff changes their mind. So I think to put some teeth in, or to make the finding legitimate as to the injury to my client, there needs to be some enforceable mechanism to make sure that my client isn't injured. And as far as I know, that's done through imposing conditions, making the applicant do something or agree to something as a condition to getting this variance. And so that's what I'd ask the commission to consider. What county council suggested yesterday was a disclosure document that would be recorded on the applicant's property, just making them aware of this, making them aware of the staff findings, and making them aware that Ms. Varma has the right to build up to the setback line. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that gets all the way there, but it's better than nothing. To at least, if someone, either the applicant or their owner, came up and objected on the snow shedding or the privacy or the sunlight or all those other things, then at least my client has something to say, well, you kind of came to this problem. Mm-hmm. That was a condition.
I get just a little concerned, though, going that far, because you're trying to indemnify acts of God almost. I mean, the snow falls off the roof or the tree falls on the house, and you're on the hook. We went through this with another situation a few years ago, and it concerns me that we try to.
Well, what if we just leave the house, take off the deck, then we don't have to say anything because that condition no longer exists for it to happen.
Well, but there's one thing saying if she built up to the setback line,
right?
So there's 5 feet away. There's no liability or there's nothing there.
No, it's all caused by.
There's no discretionary approval required to build up to the setbacks.
Yeah,
that's something that you're entitled to do.
Right.
If you're entitled to build at all, building right up to the setback is a given.
Let's get back to one at a time here.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm just going to say that I feel that the house should stay and the deck should go. And it should be set up for the 5-foot setback, just the way everybody else has to build it. There's no special circumstances. They knew in advance. If they didn't, their contractors had failed. And they can talk to him, and he should reimburse them for putting the deck there unless they were, specifically gave him instructions to do so. There's no reason why that should have been a problem whatsoever. And if the deck is taken off, then we don't need anything written into a recording of any sort because the condition that would cause the problem no longer exists. And it's quite true. I live in an area where there's 5-foot setbacks and a lot of snow, and you need that distance. You do too. I mean, you need 5 feet on either side.
Let's do this. Let's go back to Brian and see if he has. Does that conclude your presentation? I didn't want to cut you off.
Oh, sure. Unless the commission has any questions,
okay,
I'm happy to come back up.
We'll ask you up again if that's the case.
Commissioners, if I may be heard for a few more minutes in response to some of the points that Mr. Hanley made, that'd be allowable.
Well, I'd rather you address the ones that I'm making right now. Isn't this that Are we still?
Well, I think we need to get rid of all the public comment, and then we'll come back and deliberate amongst ourselves and get the input from our own council. Okay, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I want to go back and highlight a few points. One, we've marked some photographs. You have those in plain view for you. One of them is a photo. This was taken November 14, 2011. This photo was shown on the slides during staff report. And it shows fairly clearly the footings, shows the foundation. It shows that significant structural work would have to occur in order to make any of the adjustments that to comply with even the 3 foot. You'd have to knock out this very significant structural post here. I mean, this is a significant expense. It's not. It's very palpable. And we're talking about moving a footing over. You're changing the symmetry, and we're not going to get into aesthetics too much, but it's structural and it's expensive. I think those of you who are contractors who sit on this commission know that. I've also marked a group of photos that were taken around the time that the Varmas purchased the property. Okay, they show a fence that the Varmas installed. Okay, they show a water box, actually the Lundberg utility box that for some reason was put way over onto the Varma property. Okay, so when if you look at where this utility box is shown there, and you look at this Exhibit 5 to Mr. Hanley's submittal, I mean, these are not engineered. This is not an engineered drawing. This is almost back of the napkin, this drawing here. So the fact that there was an error is not apparently not surprising, but it's not something that our clients were aware of. There was no recorded survey that showed an encroachment. Our clients proceeded on the basis that the deck that was there came up right to the property line and didn't go over. So that's an important thing I want to emphasize. The other thing I mentioned before, there were stakes. There were 2 rebar stakes that showed the property line. Those stakes were to denote the property line. Those are shown in the plot maps. Those are shown in the subdivision maps as marking the property line. At least one of those stakes apparently was put in the wrong place. I understand when the Varmas had a survey done after they purchased the property to find out where the actual property line was, they discovered that one of those stakes was in the wrong place, and they pulled it out and put in a new stake that was closer to the Lundberg residence and located where the actual property line was. So that's when it was the encroachment was discovered after they had purchased.
Well, wasn't there mention of a 2003 survey?
There was mention of a 2003 survey that was disclosed during escrow, unrecorded. I think Mr. Hanley's own submittals, he notes that it was unrecorded. Our clients had no actual or constructive notice of that because it was never recorded. Completely unaware of that. So everything that our client, that the Lundbergs did was in good faith, based on the permit plans that were submitted, engineered plans showing they came up right to the property line, which they understood to be a legitimate non-conforming use. So I want to clarify another point that Mr. Hanley made, which is that...
I have a question on that last statement you
Yes.
made. Did the planning department indicate a 5-foot setback was required on the plans, on the site plan for the addition? Didn't I just see that on the screen?
What I saw...
Let me ask them, because I'm...
Well, I've looked at the plans myself, so I'd like to address that first.
The site plan...
Site plan has 2 notations in the top corner. Circles the point where the deck is on the property line, circles it and says existing. And then there's another note about 5 foot. And so the interpretation...
5 foot is a setback, that's
right.
standard.
So I think the correct interpretation of that was that upper deck is allowable as an existing non-conforming use, and that for the lower deck, they had to bring that back 5 feet. And so that's how they proceeded based on the permit in good faith. And I think, where you have a party that proceeds in good faith based on a permit and does substantial construction in reliance and good faith on the permit, they do acquire a vested right. And so that's not something that's been asserted before now, but I want to make that point. In every instance, our clients proceeded in good faith. They have spent a considerable amount of money in reliance on a permit that was issued based on a reasonable interpretation of the site plan and permit that was issued to them. You don't get this far along in construction with full masonry. This is very far along in the construction process before a courtesy notice was even issued. So when the actual stop work notice was issued, that was well downstream. Stop work notice came in 12/28/12. So that's more than 3 months after the Varmas had purchased, after they put up this information. So as far as the harm to the Varmas, again, I don't see it. Where is it? They have every entitlement, they have every right to build up to the 5-foot setback on theirs. That's the current law. This minimal deviation, I don't see how that could possibly harm them. However, our clients are more than willing to have the variance that staff is recommending to be recorded in the chain of title, in their chain of title. No objection to that. I mean, it is a matter of record, will be a matter of record at this, and giving the additional notice to others, no objection to that. But again, this issue of potential encroachment, Ms. Varma had that in escrow. She says she didn't learn of it until sometime after, but the information was known to her. I mean, this is what it was. It was farther along in construction than you see on this picture here when she went into escrow. And so this is a situation where it really strains credulity that somebody would be objecting at this point to the very minor deviation that's been requested to maintain the basic structural integrity of that deck and the functionality of the deck in terms of the deck structures and the way it's designed up top.
I have one question.
Just wait for the questions until we get through. Otherwise, we're going to be here until midnight.
Yeah. So I want to go back to the issue of legal nonconforming uses. Okay, it's our position that the code allowing for legal nonconforming uses for you to reconstruct in the same footprint as a prior nonconforming use allows that as a matter of right if you conform to the setbacks. My point for that is that shows no special privilege being granted here. Really none. So I think that's the policy that's already in the code that's recognized. And the fact that you have other instances that staff have brought to you, several where greater deviations have been granted, variances, we actually have several feet on the ground encroachment into a setback. This, we're just talking about up in the air. It's not even on the footprint on the ground. I mean, except for the tiny corner of that post. That's what that creeps in. So I think that staff's position is well supported. It's well thought through. And we think that it's properly granted by this body. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Just wanted to clarify.
Richard?
On the utility box, that would be in the public easement, wouldn't it, where it's located?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
If it's offset, it probably will bring you back onto somebody else's property to get to where you're going. Anyway. Okay, is there anyone else in the audience that would care to comment on this item? Please give us your name and...
Hello, Council. My name is Dan Wickman. I'm the Lundberg's neighbor. And I'm also the Varma's new neighbor. We are the neighbors next to Alvina on the other side, which we split the lot in half. And you keep bringing up these things about the pins being moved from him, about where they've been set, and no one knew where they were. Alvina and I split the lots already. We know as far down to the following house where each pin is, because we laid it out to split our lot with the TRPA. I'm here to protect Alan and Alvina from Varma's building their house into their setback as well, further down. It could get really nasty in the long run, because if they muddy the water really bad, the varmints are eventually probably going to build their house way down below them and block their view completely. To me, it'd be easy to figure out a mediation between the two of them to split that deck and take a little bit off and move on and be done. And he's right. That deck should be moved. It's in our 5-foot setbacks as neighbors. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to see everybody else come in the neighborhood and start playing with our setbacks, because it's wrong. If they get away with it, someone else is going to try to get away with it. And I'm happy that they're doing their house. It's beautiful, and I'm living next to it. It's been there 20 years without anything being done to it because they had a water damage. And now I look at it, and it's amazing. I love looking out my windows. You saw the old house the way it looked for 20 years. I mean, that's really bad. And we lived like that for a long, long time. So to me, I'm happy that they have their house and they're doing what they're doing. But enough is enough, and I feel that it should be left alone. The setback should be left alone on my side, their side, and any other side for anybody else and any other neighbor that's going to build in that area, because there's still open lots to build on. And I agree with you. I totally agree with you. By the way, I am a builder.
Okay, anyone else?
My name is Vanita Varma, and I'm the owner of the property which is being affected by this encroachment. Before, I had something I want to say. Before, my husband, daughter, and I had seen the property about in August of 2012. And we were currently living out of the country, and we were here for a very short time. We liked the property. We did not know about the encroachment. We knew we made a bid offer on the property. My husband left the country. I was here for 2 more weeks to send in the paperwork. I was in Southern California. I was not in Northern California at the time. And in the disclosure of our escrow, they mentioned that there was an encroachment, but they did not tell us anything about it. We didn't know. And a map was provided to our realtor, which I did not get in hand till much later. When the actual house closed, I was not even in the country at the time. And immediately, as soon as we bought and recorded the property, we made an appointment with the surveyor, Matt Webb, to go ahead and mark the corners and start. We wanted to start right away with building, and we had a topographic survey we wanted to start. And when he marked the corners, he found that a corner was out of place. He reset it, and we found that the house was encroaching into our property, and we put up the boundary fence, contacted Placer County. We retained counsel as was recommended. And we've done everything that we can from then till now to address this. In hindsight, if I had known I would be standing here with you 2 years ago, I would not have bought that property. But I don't have the luxury. Excuse me. Go ahead.
So you're saying you were notified of an encroachment
into the setback.
In the documentation, but you didn't.
No, they said encroachment. They didn't even say setback. I didn't know.
Well, encroachment, setback, that there was something with the property, but you went ahead and signed all the documentation saying you're accepting it as is.
But I did not know that it was encroaching into our property. I did not know what an encroachment was. I didn't know anything about setbacks. This is the first time I'm buying a property of this kind. I didn't know anything about it.
But you did a survey on it. So
I did a survey. I didn't have the time of doing it beforehand. I did it after, when I left, after we had a short window to close because we were leaving the country. So there was no time for for us to get all of that information. And I just want to say we bought this property in 2012 with the intention of immediately starting planning and construction of a home. And that's why we had the corners marked, and we became aware of the encroachment coming over the property line. We verified it then.
But now it's not coming over your property line. It's just up to their property line.
Yes, but I didn't. See, for me, this is a learning process. I didn't know about all this stuff. I've never dealt with anything of this sort before. If I knew, I would not be here. This has caused a great deal of grief for us as a family, because we're here 2 years later when we were at hope to move back from abroad into a house. We're still standing and have gotten nowhere.
No, and I can appreciate and I can understand that, but I still see in the documentation, because you admitted yourself, that there was documentation prior to you.
They said encroachment, but nothing, no expense. That's all it says in the escrow papers, which I read. Yeah. Nothing else. There is an encroachment. That's all I've seen. And they did not disclose anything other than that, and I didn't know. I didn't know it was this to this extent. And from speaking to the neighbors at the time, everyone believed that there was an encroachment into the setback that Placer County did not know about. I did not know that there was encroachment over the property line. And at the time, I was told by neighbors who were contractors that if Placer County is made aware of this, that it is an easy solution, it will be addressed, and this kind of stuff is not allowed to happen in the Lake Tahoe area. And I took that verbatim. I didn't know I would have to go through all this at the time. Then, so we bought this place. My daughter we came to look at properties. She saw the neighborhood. We have very good friends who live across the street. She liked the high school. This is where she wanted to live when we moved back. We went ahead and bought the property. And 2 years later, I'm telling you, we're still sitting here. We haven't even started because of this whole problem. From the onset, we've followed the county's recommendations. We provided a great deal of supporting evidence on the complaint. We've waited. The county told us it would take about 18 months to resolve this, and we've waited. We've not proceeded with anything. We just sat and waited for this to be resolved and the law to be upheld. We've lost a great deal of time and money during this process. And during this process, our neighbors have fought us every step of the way. We put up the corners and we put up a boundary fence and we asked them to stop trespassing onto our property. And it's been documented. Mrs. Lundberg has cut through our fence and installed fencing to support her construction, right, for her continued construction of her property on our property. There's photographs of her on our property doing this. There's photographs of this fence that was installed after we'd put up our fence and no trespassing signs. I mean, if this was all an act of good faith, they were trying to amicably resolve this with us, there should have never been all these issues along the way where she kept defying our wishes for her to stay off our property until this is resolved. And she's called the police saying I erected a fence on her property. She's threatened legal action, and she's disputed our surveyor's findings. And because she disputed our surveyor's findings, we went ahead and paid for an additional survey to exactly document her encroachment, the encroachment. We've done everything that they've asked for. And on several occasions over the past 2 years, our attorney, Brian Hanley, has asked for a meeting on site where they bring their documentation supporting their claims and we bring our documentation. No meeting has ever taken place. No documentation. We've never been provided a single piece of documents from them supporting their claims in the past 2 years. They've never provided anything. And I just have to say that we bought this property in good faith. We want to build our home here. We've already bought this property. I can't go back and change that. The money's already been spent. And the topography of the lot will require us to build with 5 feet from the property line. And the granting of this variance is going to diminish the value of my lot and the money that I'm going to put into this future home. As you could see from the first picture Ms. Carnahan put up there, there's ample space between each and every home. Every home in that neighborhood is enjoying their privacy, their safety, their buffer from their neighbors. And I will not be able to do that. If you see that everyone has adhered to what the law of the land is. And I feel like I should be granted the same privilege that everyone else is. I'm not going to try to build over the property line. I don't want to do that. I do not want to move in next door to someone that I have conflict with. I did not want to have conflict with the neighbor before I even came to the area. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Fire safety from not only forest fires, but structural fires. What if there was a problem with my house and it caught fire, or if their house, if something happened? I mean, it's going to be arm's length, just a little more than arm's length away. That's how far the house will be. There'll be a greater potential for damage from snow accumulation and melt from our respective roofs. Our privacy will be lost, and all of these things were meant to be protected by zoning ordinances. That's why they were brought into effect in the first place. And I just ask that you consider the impact that this will have on us while making your decision.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think, yes.
Make one point. Excuse me, sorry. I I just wanted to clear one thing up from the questions directed at my client concerning her knowledge in the escrow process. I think it's clear, and I believe County Council would agree, that the burden is on the applicant to show that the standards for the variance aren't met. Nowhere in there are concepts of neighbors proving or disproving their knowledge or, equitable considerations of that nature. The burden's not on my client to prove what she knew or didn't know. She's entitled to rely on Placer County to enforce the side setbacks. Mr. Edstrom, who circled existing, he had no authority to approve either a variance or a non-conforming use. That's something for the Planning Commission. That's something for the board. That's something for a noticed hearing. So his action had no legal authority. It wasn't an approval. So I think I just want to make clear that the shoe's on the applicant's foot to prove up here that there's special circumstances. And I still, everything was focused on the equities. I haven't heard anything that would support why this deck can't be moved over. And I don't believe cost or expense is a factor. So
let me ask you one more question. Somewhere in the discussion there was talk that there was a meeting set up at one point where the various parties were going to get together and try to resolve the issue between you.
Sure.
Is there any hope that that meeting could be reconstructed and come to fruition? It seems like there could be some solution between you and hopefully in the process save the relationship between the neighbors for the future.
Sure, there's always hope. I believe the applicant's council suggested a meeting first when this first came to a head in late 2012. And we suggested, sure, we'll be willing to meet once you come with your own survey. The issue at that time was whether or not there was an encroachment onto my client's property. And
all right.
We reached out last year for a meeting, and we haven't received a copy of a survey disputing the web survey, and we haven't received any reaching out to resolve it. So it's certainly a possibility.
I think as an offshoot of this meeting, everybody understands what the issues are and what the options are as well. And it might be, I don't know, it might be the simplest thing if you all could get together and resolve this, and then we'll come back and take action based on what you agree on. That way no one goes away totally the loser.
Yeah, and the other option, I would guess that whatever way the commission decides today, I would guess that the issue would be appealed. So another approach would be to make a decision. I would guess the appellate process would take a month or and we could think about meeting.
Well, we're meeting back up at Tahoe in June sometime. I suppose if we could continue it.
Be June 26th.
Okay, well, I think we've gone far enough at this point. I'd like to turn to County Council and have her now explain what she wanted to explain a while ago, but didn't get to it.
In response to Commissioner Nader's question, let me just back up and set the stage because we do have neighbors in a dispute. But the commission is here to determine whether there is substantial evidence that has been presented in the staff report, in accompanying documents, and within testimony of the parties in this hearing to support the grant of a variance for the upper deck. And I'm limiting my comments to the upper deck because it appears that is the only issue of contention here is that particular variance request. So, yes?
So what you're saying is that the lower deck has already been agreed to be moved and just the...
That is my understanding from what I've heard at this hearing.
Okay.
Yes, and if the parties are differing with that, please say so. But my understanding from everything I've heard here is, and I'm getting a nod yes, that all parties agree that the variance to the setback for the house, there's no dispute about granting that. If the commission desires to, let me clarify that, to grant that the parties are in agreement with staff's recommendation regarding the lower deck. Of course, it's the Planning Commission's determination whether they will...
Okay, a technical question then.
Mm-hmm.
They're agreeing that the lower deck would be pulled back, but the lower part of the deck, the post that holds up the upper and the lower deck, still stays.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, right. So what I'm hearing from the parties is the dispute right now is regarding whether or not the Planning Commission should grant the variance for the upper deck. So I want to direct my comments to that, and we'll be going through, obviously, each one of the requests and dealing with them separately, and it'll be the Planning Commission's decision as to what the final action is. With respect to the variance, one correction to the record, the variance findings are set forth in Chapter 17, 60.100. I believe Council said in error, Chapter 16 is actually Chapter 17. And I just want to direct the Commission's attention to those findings. The first finding is whether there are special circumstances applicable to the property to grant this variance. Now, the cases have found, a lot of the cases do focus on the physical attributes of a property, topography, and this commission has heard enough variances to have heard the, topography, vegetation, tree canopy are often raised. But what the Craig case stated, and this came up in the Hilt variance, which was heard in 2009. Some of the commissioners may have been here. I believe Commissioners Simonson and Johnson were here at the time. It is not just limited to physical attributes. What the Craig case made clear is there may be other aspects that constitute special circumstances. What those are is for the commission to identify. Staff has presented what they believe to be circumstances for the commission to consider. One of those is the fact that the deck was constructed based on the 1978 zoning code, which did allow for an encroachment, encroachment of 3 feet. Now, Council, Mr. Hanley states that, well, the zoning code doesn't say that that applies to a deck, it's an uncovered porch. I'll defer to staff, but my understanding in discussions with them is at the time that was interpreted to also include decks. Now, does that mean that this is a non-conforming use? No, because had the property boundary been ascertained at the time, it would have even been determined back in 1978 that a variance would have been required. What staff is presenting, however, in their staff report is looking at the totality of the circumstances. Does this meet one of the other criteria for findings as a minimal departure? So what staff has done is presented you the entire story of when this deck was built, how the deck was viewed at the time in terms of setbacks and allowing it to cantilever over the setback, and now bringing it forward in time and saying, back in 78 it would have required a variance, wasn't caught, we'll all admit that. Now we're here, how do we view it? Do we view it based on the current setback requirements of 5 feet, or do we view it in the context of it being in place for 30 some odd years with the notion that it was cantilevered over based on the old code? The commission has every authority, and in fact I encourage the commission to look at the evidence and make a determination of what the commission believes as to whether this is, 1, a special circumstance, 2, whether this is a minimal departure. 3, the other thing I should point out of the findings, it does require the commission to find that under the circumstances, the grant of the variance will not adversely affect public health and safety. That will be of the neighbors, of the surrounding area, of the subdivision. Commissioner Nader, I apologize. I'm not sure if I've covered all of your questions. So,
well, I guess, again, he made the point that this would go against policy, and that if we did approve it as staff has recommended, would we expose the county to potentially illegal action?
That's quite possible. That's quite possible. And if it does go to legal action, what the court looks at, and I can attest to it personally, the Hilt matter, the Hilt variance did go to litigation. the court found for the county in determining that the findings to support the variance, in that case it was a variance to a setback to a road easement for the entire house. It wasn't caught in plan check that the easement was there. The easement didn't show up on the parcel map. I'll make it a long story short. It didn't show up. It was discovered. The house was constructed within that setback, and a variance was brought forward through code enforcement to resolve the issue. It was appealed. It was litigated. The trial court found for the county and said that there were sufficient findings articulated by the Planning Commission and on appeal of the board to support the grant of the variance. The reason I bring this up is it once again illustrates that each variance is a case in and of itself. The commission has to look at all the facts that have been presented, staff report, testimony, photos, and determine whether you believe and find that there is substantial evidence to support findings to grant this variance. If you do not, then the commission should deny the variance. If you do, I'd appreciate it if the commission would articulate either from the staff report, the testimony, what has convinced the commission to grant the variance into the record, as I do believe this will probably go on appeal. But yes, there is the potential of liability. That's the nature of the game, but really what it comes down to is this commission's determination of whether there is substantial evidence that you have been presented with on the record to support staff's recommendation.
Okay, now that you've given us that great presentation, what is your opinion of the likelihood that there could be a resolution of this by the two parties meeting in?
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you bringing that up. I spoke to both Mr. Diepenbrock and Mr. Hanley yesterday about this hearing. Obviously, the county, and part of this, the code enforcement in this county is the policy is for voluntary compliance. A variance is one of the ways to try and bring voluntary compliance to a property, and that's why we're here today. The county always looks to see if there's the potential for the matter to be resolved by the parties short of taking this on appeal into the court. It's expensive for everyone, county and the parties. I spoke to Mr. Hanley, and I understand his client's concerns about potentials of, say, the Lundbergs objecting to them building to the property to the setback line. But as Commissioner Moss mentioned, they have the right to build up to that setback line. Now, there are issues potentially of the snow sloughing, I believe it's called, or the snow shedding, I believe it's called. Mr. Wagner has mentioned that the setbacks have been in place. They are established, by the way, by the Uniform Building Code, correct? Yeah, have been in place for a while. Can we guarantee that that will stay? Say the Varmas decide to construct in 5 years? No, we can't. I mean, our codes do change. What I suggested to the parties is there a potential for compromise in, say, cutting part of the deck off? I don't know if there is. Is there a potential that disclosure is recorded, which is really, quite frankly, overkill? The variance is recorded on the property, which establishes constructive notice that there is an encroachment into the setback. But if the parties would like to fashion a potential disclosure that doesn't prevent either party from exercising their due process and freedom of speech rights in any other discretionary permit proceeding, certainly staff and our office would be happy to look at that. But we can't force the parties to come to a resolution, and we can't force them to a continuance. If the parties want this to be decided here, really it's up to the commission. If the commission wants to continue, and I should point that out, if the commission wants to continue to hear more evidence, seek clarification, that most certainly is also the prerogative of this commission.
Well, I guess it's the pressure would be on the applicant at this point to agree to meet and talk with the neighbor.
I'm seeing shaking right there. I don't think it's going to happen.
Just as much as...
ourselves first?
Huh?
Can we talk amongst ourselves?
Well,
I have a couple questions.
Okay, just one second. If it's to talk about the parties getting together and trying to resolve this, yes, I'd like to hear more.
I'd just like to briefly respond to that, yes. I mean, I do want to remind the commission that the Lundbergs already cut off as much as they felt they could, right, back to the bolts. And so wouldn't want to be penalized now for having already made an accommodation. Okay, we could have done another survey and disputed by a few inches where they found the property line. We didn't do that. We accepted their survey. We didn't quibble with it. So we've already made accommodations there. Okay, and we've made as much accommodation already by shaving off that end of the deck without destroying the whole structural integrity of the deck. And so we are interested, if we think, in getting a resolution today by this body, and would request that occur. If you have any additional questions for additional, clarification of the record, happy to provide it. But we think, please don't penalize us for already have compromised.
One question on that. You're saying you compromised, but did you talk to them before you decided to cut the deck off, or was that just on your own saying, okay, that's my compromise?
Well, okay, we've been back and forth with letters between counsel from our firm to their firm a long time ago, and as Mr. Hanley, I think Ms. Varma mentioned, the statement was, there's no use in having a sit-down unless you bring your own survey. And so instead of bringing our own survey, we just accepted their survey. So, that's all I can say at this point.
Okay. All right, we're going to, is there any other public comment by anyone? Seeing no one coming forward, then we'll cut off the public testimony for the time being. And Mickey, you would like to have a discussion?
Yeah, let's start off with the simple fact that when you go to do a project up there, and I believe this is a county code, that the property line is strung when the inspector comes out. So everybody's aware of where the property line is before the footing gets poured with concrete. So they know that they're in the setback, because the 5-foot setback's been there for decades. So the idea that we didn't know or we're compromising, I don't think that's relevant, to be honest with you. Everything starts from that point forward when this permit was granted for the remodel. That's my opinion.
I guess what I was hearing is that they knew they were within the setback, but they didn't know that they were across the property line.
Well, either way, across the property line is definitely wrong, and in the setback is just as wrong. You can't go up there and build something in the setback. It's just not allowed. They knew where the setback was because they had the property line strung when they had to do the foundation. And that's just, not right.
Now, there was a deck on the original house. Yeah. Was that deck in the exact same location as this new deck?
The post.
Yeah. The post, basically?
Basically?
Yeah, to my knowledge it was. That's what the documents...
Okay, that's been the issue. I will say that in the early days at Tahoe, we never bothered to string it. What the county...
I know. And in the early days, I built some of those houses. But I'm saying when this was built, that's when it was, destroying.
Well, it got picked up later, yeah.
No, when this was built, what you're looking at right there, this new one,
rebuilt.
They knew where the.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So it's what happened 20 years ago or 50 years ago doesn't matter. It just doesn't. This is new. This is a new permit, and they know it's a 5-foot setback. It's even circled. I don't know where there could be confusion.
Well, I think county council has said that there is some vested rights once you have something existing.
No, I don't think that's what she's saying. I think that it could be our decision that it could be something, but it doesn't exist. And once that string is there, it's out the window. We have to decide whether it wasn't or not, and we didn't.
I don't know that how it happened or when it happened truly makes a difference. The fact of the matter is it happened, and now we got to clean up the mess one way or another. Whether it happened in the 70s, in the 80s, the 90s, or yesterday, it doesn't really matter. It just makes for a story.
Right.
But
and it doesn't even matter if there's two people arguing. It's the county, us, defending the setbacks or not.
And with that, I don't know if an upper deck becomes acceptable, why cutting off a lower deck changes things with regards to the neighbor's privacy or their their safety or any of the other items brought up. If something works and the first deck is allowable or the upper deck is allowable, the same logic should apply to the lower deck. Or if there is no logic to allow them, then the same should go for both.
I think there was no lower deck before.
Well, yeah, but I mean, again, if your footprint's essentially the same, whatever.
Doesn't matter how high up you go, it's still.
Whatever encroachment still exists, and the fact that it's a 2-story encroachment versus a 1-story encroachment, again, I don't know that is a critical detail. It either works or it doesn't.
Either, I agree with Jeff, you're either encroaching at the 4-foot level or the 24-foot level. It's still an encroachment.
Just for the record, I want to go on record saying the fact that the deck has existed is but one factor. I didn't mean to indicate that automatically meant you had to somehow grant a variance. It's simply a factor to consider.
Part of the package, huh? Okay. I guess we're at the point where we have to decide, should we go back and see if they want to voluntarily do it, or do you think we're beyond that?
Well, either that or we make a motion and then they sit down between now and the appeal and work it out. Just we'll put the fire under them.
Back up one picture, please. To the house with the gray with the triangle. Back.
Back to
Where it showed the upper deck and
with the tapes on it.
no, just
That
the
one.
gray. Go back one.
There.
No, back where it had the black and white with the gray showing the 2 foot from the property line. That one right there. Because in other words, the original approved was you're saying 3 feet into the setback. And right now that says it is existing, right? That's the existing.
The 3 feet encroachment thing from the past is.
No, I'm just saying.
So this is the dotted line here?
Yeah, that
shows how it was built initially back in November, right? And then after notification that after getting the new survey, cut it back to here.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying. In the past, I hear that the encroachment was could be up to 3 feet in the 74 codes. Well, even now, it's still not in.
It's still over.
Yeah, it's still over.
It's over 3 feet in, is what you're saying.
No, yeah, it's over 3 feet because there's the
Into
3.
the
Yeah.
5-foot setback.
I don't know. I have.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that if we can, unless somebody else got some more to say.
Could I make a suggestion? If the commission is ready for their motions, I would suggest that we take each one separately, including the variance for the house, so that we kind of narrow things down, if that's all right. So I'd suggest you do your CEQA determination, then let's take the lower deck, then let's take the variance for the house, and then that'll leave us with the variance for the upper deck, if that's acceptable.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, because the house is not an issue.
Yeah.
Oops, that's not the word I was looking for. Yes, it is. Okay, does anyone care to make a motion for the variance for the house?
I will make a motion that we, determine that the project is categorically exempt from CEQA review and that we approve the variance that allows the encroachment into the setback for the corner of the physical house structure itself.
Second.
Okay. It's, we have the amount, but it was like, what, a couple inches or something, so it's minimal. Okay, is there any other, did we have a second to that? Yes, we have a second. Is there any other comments on it?
No,
Roll call, please.
The house is in.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
Yes.
Mr. Moss?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Denayo?
Yes.
Mr. Sevison?
Yes. Okay, that issue's out. Then we'll go back now and the findings for the lower deck.
Does that have to be lower deck and upper deck together?
I'd do it together.
Separate.
separate.
They're separate, yeah, because they've got it set
Well-
up separate.
That makes, okay.
Well, it's in the agenda as one, huh?
Well, I'll make a motion then to deny the variance for the request for the lower deck exemption.
Right.
Period.
Which affects the upper deck then.
Yeah, I know, that's what I mean, it's, the decks are the same, it's having this
Well,
separate.
We, just to clarify that,
It's not really.
My understanding was that the support post for the upper deck was not disputed, the location of
Well,
that?
see, the support deck for the upper and the lower are the same.
It was disputed, I believe.
And I'm making a motion, so sit down. I'm making a motion that we deny the variance for the lower deck, period.
Okay. Second.
Chairman, just real quick. Number 2 under the recommendation basically says that deny the variance request for the portion of the lower deck, but also has added language in there which requires the Lundbergs to remove said portion of lower deck within 60 days of this action.
Was that part of our variance denial, or is that just something the county has to do if
That
the denial is?
That would be part of your denial motion.
So stated, so.
Then 60 days.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Oh, what do we do now?
We're going to vote on, his motion was to deny the variance for the lower deck.
Just the
Okay, well, I guess my comment is, why?
Why? Because it's in the setback, and they knew it was going to be in the setback, and it should never have been built there in the first place.
Well, it was.
Well, I can go build in the guys next door to me. That doesn't mean anything. They did it wrong. They weren't supposed to do it that way. They should never have done it, and they shouldn't do it now.
Well, 30 years ago, they did it right.
No, 30 years ago has nothing to do with it.
There was no lower deck.
Actually, I disagree, Rich, because it's still not, if it was done 30 years ago to the
Still be wrong.
70s, they could encroach into 3 feet.
Which they did in the 70s.
Right, but
There
it's
was
still
no lower
over
deck in
3
the 70s, though.
It's over the 3 feet. It's over the 3 feet. That's why I wanted to bring up that one that showed that gray area. It shows that.
Mr. Chair,
Over.
I think we're mixing it up. We're talking about the lower deck right now?
Right, but it's still.
Right, the lower deck
it's
was not
still-
existing. The lower deck's new.
Yeah.
Okay, so the,
The lower deck wasn't there before.
Right.
Oh, so we're denying the variance on the lower deck?
correct.
Okay.
And the applicant is acceptable to removing that part of the deck, so.
He's already done it.
No.
That, the
No,
lower part
no,
of
no,
the
the
deck.
lower part of the deck still includes that post, and that post is going to go.
Well,
The motion is to deny the variance for the lower deck, period.
May I be
No,
heard on this?
no.
Actually, this affects my client pretty significantly, because the way it's proposed in the staff report is that
Well,
that the
this-
post remain, even if the lower deck be removed, so we don't affect the structural integrity. I want to make sure that we're clear on what we're voting for in terms of this lower deck.
I think we're clear.
Okay.
I think we're clear.
Are we?
There's been a motion and a second. Let's make a decision.
Okay, roll call.
Well, what are we clear on here?
We're voting
To deny the
the
variance.
motion is to deny
For the lower.
the variance for the lower deck.
And that includes the post?
Well, if we approve the variance for the upper deck, the post is going to stay because it holds the upper deck up.
Correct.
If the upper deck gets denied, then the post is going to go.
Or has to be moved over.
Yeah.
Or just moved over,
Yeah.
right.
Just moved over, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
So I mean, they can still have both decks if they move it over, if they came to a compromise.
yeah, it doesn't change the structural integrity of the building. They
it's
just have to
still
move the
over.
deck over.
3 feet.
Okay,
and
roll
not
call.
there.
Mr. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Nader,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
No.
Mr. Denine,
Yes.
Mr. Sevison.
Yes. Okay, the next item then is the appeal for the upper deck.
Right. Well, I'll make the same motion that I move to deny a variance for the upper deck.
You've got no way to support it, so we have to.
Oh, but it stays there. It stays there.
Make it official.
Unless it moves.
There was a motion, that was your motion. Who, was it the same second, Wayne, or did?
Well, I think you made the motion.
Right. So you need a second.
And I'm not seconding that one. I'm not going for that one.
What, on the upper deck, denial of deck?
I'm going to support staff on that one.
Oh, I see, okay. Is there a second to the motion to remove the upper deck?
I understand, but
Oh, To move the post?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's basically to move the post. And
Yeah, because you have to clean up the whole thing.
There's no way you can have it. You can't get there from here. Okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
No.
Mr. Moss?
No.
Mr. Johnson?
No.
Mr. Denio?
Yes.
Mr. Sevison?
Yes.
3-3.
What was it, 3-3?
3-3.
So
Well,
it's denied.
it didn't pass, the motion didn't fail.
3-3.
Which leaves us in a very peculiar position. I guess the next thing would be a motion to approve the upper deck, but you can't get there from here because you had no way to support it.
Well, you have to move.
Or do you have to
You still have to
continue it till there's 7?
So Ken, how are you thinking about, I guess what's I'm wondering is, how do you move the post? What are you talking about in
Well,
terms of support?
go back, can you go back to that picture? Because I know they keep talking about it, and I know there's a lot of contractors in here. Yeah, you have to take it apart, it's cantilevered over, but you'd have to probably move the footing over, depending if you keep it the 3-foot setback, or if you go to the 5-foot setback. I mean, I understand what their problem is because then all of a sudden, when you look at, if you're facing it, it's gonna, one post is gonna be in closer than the other one, but
That's already the case on the other side of the deck. If you look at the far post on the right side, it's closer in than the...
yeah, well, it'd be like that,
And let's
actually.
face it, aesthetics is not exactly the...
Yeah, that's not our purview, it's up to...
So you're amenable to a 3-foot setback?
A 5-foot setback is
Well,
what it should be.
I'm asking Ken here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, if it was within the 3 and that gray wasn't there, because when the original house was built, they were allowed to go up to 3 feet in the 5-foot setback.
And so the upper deck would be fine if they're within the 3-foot setback.
Has the upper deck not already been cut back a little bit?
They cut it 2 feet, but
So that puts it within the 3 feet we're
No.
talking about?
no,
Just puts it in the palm.
Still way...
it's still over. It's right on the property line. If you go back, maybe go back to that picture so that way everybody can,
Well, I have a question for council. You got it?
right there, see where the gray area is? That's over on the,
The gray
Upper
area
side.
is the 3-foot setback.
Right.
So
So you
the
move the
post
post-
is outside of it. They'd have to move the post in about
the
the width
post
of
width.
itself.
Yeah.
Couple of feet.
Yeah, if they moved it.
For all I know, they
See,
may
if
be
that
able to
was the-
cantilever off the existing if they only go over that far.
I would be
Might be
amenable
able-
to that.
You may be able to keep that same post, cantilever, do a 45 on it, and get there anyway without having to move that post at all. And I have a question for council. We got a second. On a 3-3 tie like this, could we postpone it till there's an odd number, like 7? Or like
5.
You most certainly can. We'll have to make sure that Commissioner Rakucci listens to the entire record and attests to that, but that is one of the options that you have.
Talk about it. I mean, it's a dead motion. I mean, we'll discuss
I think
it.
there's probably support to go back to the 3-foot setback and make that the standard.
Do that again?
Or,
Say that
or
again?
allow it where they could say it was from the 74, the original.
3 feet encroaching on the 5-foot.
Can we make another motion?
Because that's what the original.
Right, but that's going to be more expensive, tougher to do than just keeping it 5.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we approve a variance for the upper portion of the deck at the corner of the house, that it can encroach up to 3 feet into the 5-foot setback.
Can I?
I'll second it.
Okay, discussion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you keep that from going down to the ground? Can you just have the upper deck itself encroach and not have the lower deck or supports encroach? I mean, you can do that.
That would be an engineering question that we
Well, that's
could
one
answer.
that yeah,
36 inch.
exactly. Well, we're making engineering calls here, so it is.
Could we speak to that, please?
No, not while this is on for a second.
I think
I'm just asking you a
beyond
question.
that.
I'm not making
Thank-
a motion or anything.
No, I mean, we have the engineering that says that if you have, I'm now remember.
Oh, okay.
That if we have the post that supports the upper deck,
Mhm.
it has to have a connection on the lower side for stability to hold on to it. It has to have you don't have to have a deck on there, but it has to be, you have to have that girder go all the way to it.
You have to have a girder to that post there.
On the top and down below.
Right, but the one way out the end, if you remove it completely, that post there is still secured, and you can cantilever off of it and 45 off of it, so that there's nothing encroaching on the ground itself. You simply have an upper deck going.
I think what the
into
applicant's asking for is to have the lower and the upper deck go to the 3-foot thing, so that they can,
No, we've already denied that.
Well, we've
already
denied
that
that-
lower deck thing, so that ain't happening.
We're talking about it, you know, I guess, as far as doing engineering, I don't think we're doing that. We're looking at this and saying, well, they had original setback of
5 feet.
Of 3 feet.
5 feet. The original setback was 5 feet. They encroached. Whoever did it in the first place messed up.
Well, the county code at the time that the deck was originally built allowed for a 3-foot.
3 foot into the 5.
And so we're backing off too. And however the applicant engineers it, it's up to them. But we're, I think what I hear the motion saying is we're giving the okay for the 3-foot encroachment
on the upper deck.
On the upper deck.
But you're not offering that on the lower deck then?
Well, I didn't hear that in the motion.
No, we've already denied the lower deck, so we're just talking about the upper deck. But I want to ask Jeff about his motion, is that, do we know if that pier that's on the corner is 3 foot out from the property line?
I don't know, and to be honest with you, as far as my motion goes, I don't care. That's a structural issue that the builders are going to have to work out amongst themselves. I'm just saying, if they originally thought they were good with 3-foot encroachment, I don't oppose to allowing them to do what has traditionally been allowed to happen in the past. I don't see as a patio versus a deck as a whole lot of difference. And I can see how that has been interpreted to be one and the same over the years.
There's a porch.
And so that being said, like I say, my motion would say they can encroach 2 feet into the 5 foot, or 3 feet into the 5-foot setback with the upper deck, assuming they can build it that way.
But looking at that, if that scale is correct on what's up on the screen, I would say that that pier probably is okay within the 3 feet. It's close, but I think it's probably okay.
I don't know, that's not for us to determine.
Yeah, again, I'm not making my motion around the location of the pier or whether it structurally works or anything else. If they can build what they would like to build in the way of an upper deck by encroaching 3 feet into the setback, my motion would support their
Which
ability.
was what the existing structure was, and accepted it.
Yeah.
But that's
Okay.
fine.
You have a motion, didn't you second it?
I seconded it.
We have a motion to second it. Is there any other important issues we have to talk about?
I just want to reiterate, I don't think that that's, logical. I don't think that you take away the lower deck and leave the upper deck if it's encroaching. I think that the same rules apply, and that when they drew the plans for this, regardless of what was accepted encroachment, 50 years ago, this was new. This wasn't, the guy didn't draw these plans assuming an encroachment. When that string was there, they knew.
Okay.
That's all.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Gray?
No.
Mr. Nader?
Yes.
Mr. Moss?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Denio?
Yes.
Mr. Sevison?
Yes. Motion carries. So I think everyone must be pretty clear about what we've approved at this point. No, there's a head shaking.
I was just going to ask for a clarification so that we're all clear as to the motion. Let me paraphrase, and you tell me if this is correct. What the commission has voted to grant is a variance that allows a maximum 3-foot encroachment into the 5-foot setback for the upper deck and all pertinences thereto. Is that a correct restatement of your motion?
That's
exactly what I said.
Thank you.
He thinks you're marvelous. His wife doesn't understand him that well. Okay, I think we've pretty much, is there anything else we've left undone, Counselor?
You need to address the appeal provisions. Provisions for appeal.
Oh, we have, there's appeal rights, which are $536 at the front desk, and I guess this is an appealable item, which can be appealed to the Board of Supervisors from this domain.
That's within 10 days?
It doesn't say that. 10 calendar days, great big letters. So it has to be done in 10 calendar days. All right, we thank you all for your efforts. I don't know, these are tough situations, they're never easy. Appreciate it all, and if there's nothing else to be brought forward, we're adjourned.